Hello, my name is Brock Pace, and I'm going to be doing a paper presentation on reCaptcha, a real-time CAPTCHA-based liveness detection system. So this paper was written by Erkam Uzun, Simon Pak Ho Chung, Irfan Essa, and Wenki Lee at the Georgia Institute of Technology. That's where we go. And this was presented at the Network and Distributed System Security NDSS Symposium in February 18th to 21st, 2018 in San Diego, California. And then down here, I have the link to the actual paper. So I'm gonna go into a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about in this video. So first, we're going to get into the problem with face and voice authentication that reCaptcha is hoping to address. Then we'll talk about the solution, what reCaptcha does on a conceptual level. We're also in this section going to be talking about the benefits of CAPTCHAs, why they're used, why they're helpful in this situation. Next, we're going to be comparing spoofing techniques to see how malicious attackers would want to get into a face and voice authentication device. Then we'll get into how reCaptcha actually works behind the scenes and how it's run. And there's like a flow chart that'll demonstrate that. We'll then get into reCaptcha analysis and how users feel about it, how it reacts with actual humans testing it. Then we'll get into the potential issues with reCaptcha, things that you could see potentially might be causing a problem with it, or things to note about reCaptcha. And then finally, we will wrap it up with a conclusion that just sums everything up. All right, so first we've got the problem with face and voice authentication. So I think it's very apparent that facial and voice recognition for authentication is on the rise, and this isn't due to security, really. It's more so due to convenience, because you might not want to type your password every time you open your phone or another device, and so it's very convenient to just be able to look down at your phone and then be able to get into your device. But this exposes that hardware to very primitive cyber attacks by spoofing identity and getting a recording of a voice clip or a video of the target. So if you have to say, like, unlock phone with your voice or something, and somebody has access to you saying that, they will be able to access your phone. If somebody has a picture or a video of you, they might be able to unlock your phone. And, you know, especially now with like deep fakes and stuff, like it's very easy to spoof what people look like, especially famous people. And so here, this is how the attacks enter the authentication server. So here we have very real user, Tom Hanks, and he's getting into his phone, and how they do that is with a camera that records his face, and then potentially audio sensors, which would record his voice. And if he says or makes the right face, he's going to get into his phone. They will send that captured data over here, and then they will verify it with the authentication server. If he's verified, boom, he's in. But there are two ways that attackers could get into this phone and intercept it. So the first of these are presentation attacks. Presentation attacks are physical attacks, like wearing a mask or holding up a picture or anything in the physical world where the phone sees the actual image and it confuses it for the image it's trying to verify. Here, for example, they have a hard copy of like an image of Tom Hanks. They print it out, they make a 3D mask out of it, they wear it. The phone now thinks, hey, that's Tom Hanks. I'll give him access to all the data. That's a very primitive version of this kind of attack. But there's also compromising attacks where it bypasses the sensors and then sends whatever video or audio they want to the captured data to authenticate it. So in this example, they have a 2D image of Tom Hanks, and then they have a video of Tom Hanks that would get his image from multiple different angles. And with that, they're able to render a manipulatable 3D face of Tom Hanks. And they can just put that into the captured data, it goes to the authentication server, bypasses the camera sensor. So it doesn't matter what's actually on the screen here. All this knows is that you've got 3D Tom Hanks, and that's what they're looking for. So you're in. And yeah, so compromising attacks are fabricating the output of sensors rather than what the phone actually sees in front of it. And compromising attacks are more scalable than presentation attacks. And that sort of makes sense because presentation attacks, they always need a physical component to them. They always need like a person in front of the phone, they need some kind of physical access to the device. And that in a lot of ways could be easily preventable. Whereas compromising attacks, they just need to get the information past the camera and the sensors, which makes them a little more worrisome, I would say, than presentation attacks. And so one defense strategy to this that a lot of facial recognition software uses is to make the user perform a specific task, like smiling or blinking, or for example, if you have an iPhone, they make you look at the screen and it'll track where your eyes are going, and then it'll only unlock once you looked at the screen. So that's fine. That's better than just having a picture of somebody's face. But still, it doesn't really address this problem too well because, for example, Tom Hanks is a very notable figure. I'm sure there are plenty of videos and images of him smiling or blinking or looking at the screen. And so if you know what the device is looking for to get in, it's very easy to find this information on somebody, especially if there's somebody famous who would have a very good reason to keep their data secure. So the question is, how do we get around this problem? And the answer is CAPTCHAs. So these are the most popular CAPTCHA schemes. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you know what CAPTCHAs are, but if you don't, to access websites to verify you're not human, they will always make you type like certain numbers or letters or something to prove that you're not a robot just hacking in or whatever. So this is like the most common version, reCaptcha, which is used in LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter, Blogspot, WordPress, and like a bunch of others. This one's very common. This is the eBay CAPTCHA. This is the Yandex CAPTCHA. This is the Yahoo CAPTCHA, Amazon CAPTCHA, and the Microsoft CAPTCHA, which is used by Bing and Live.com. But the CAPTCHAs we're talking about, the CAPTCHAs that are used by reCaptcha, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. The CAPTCHAs that are used by that are going to be audio CAPTCHAs. So instead of typing this, you are going to be speaking it out loud, and it will recognize that you're saying the right code to get into your device, phone, or whatever. And there's a lot of benefits to using CAPTCHAs in general. So for example, instead of making it harder to generate a spoofed video, which is what they've tried to address with blinking and smiling and stuff like that, instead of making it harder to generate the spoofed video, we can make it harder to know what the required task is by locking it behind a CAPTCHA. So if an attacker knows that there's a CAPTCHA involved and then the CAPTCHA is randomly generated, they now have to figure out how to get past I'm just going to keep using the Tom Hanks example. They have to figure out how to get past Tom Hanks's phone saying each of these random letters and numbers in Tom Hanks's voice. And that's going to be difficult. There's pictures of him smiling and blinking, but there probably isn't a video of him saying 197761. So it makes sense that this would be more secure than what most facial recognition software uses now. So yeah, the authentication device will also take a video of the user solving the CAPTCHA or a series of pictures to verify that it's actually the user that is solving it. And for a normal user, it takes on average less than 1 second to solve CAPTCHA. And that makes sense. I mean, like, boom, D3PYHYZ6. That didn't take longer than a second. So like, it's very fast to do that. And for an automated attack, they have to solve the CAPTCHA before generating the required task. So like, even if they know they have to say these words, these letters in Tom Hanks's voice, they would have to figure out how to do all of that stuff before before they can spoof the data in a compromising attack. So it's very useful to have something that changes each time you log in. Let's see. So it can be assumed in general that it will be faster for a normal user to solve the CAPTCHA than an automated attack, and that makes a lot of sense because a normal user can just read it. An automated attack has to get into the phone, has to have access to see what the CAPTCHA is, has to be able to decipher what this is in plain text, and then has to, again, spoof the voice to get it to say all that. That's going to take a lot longer than just saying it yourself. And so for authentication, you can introduce a timeout that will block out malicious users attempting to solve the CAPTCHA, but it will allow normal users through swiftly. So for example, if it takes on average less than a second to solve CAPTCHA, and I read this CAPTCHA, it's going to take a malicious attacker a lot longer to figure this out. So it can say, hey, you haven't started talking in a second. You must be a malicious attacker or did this by accident. Let's reset the CAPTCHA so you can try it again. And that's very useful because now we know if it's a true and honest user or a malicious attacker. But it's worth noting that this only increases security with compromising attacks rather than presentation attacks. Because if you have a presentation attack and then you get the data, you're still going to be in front of the phone. You're going to be able to see what the CAPTCHA says, and you have the same access to the device as you would otherwise. Whereas a compromising attack, they're going to have to get access to this device without actually seeing it. So compromising attacks are mostly what reCaptcha is hoping to prevent and minimize. So we're going to be comparing some spoofing techniques here, some ways that attackers will take people's faces to get into devices. And so I'm going to break down each one of these, what they are. So this is the genuine, real human face. This should work to unlock a phone every time. These three up at the top, these are all using 3D generation software to generate his face each time. And according to the article, this isn't super difficult software to come by. So if you have access to it, you can do this yourself. And you'll notice this picture here even has the watermark of the software that's used. So that's interesting. That'll come into play. And then down here, we have all 2D images. These are a little more primitive than actually generating a 3D face, but we've got a cartoon version of this guy, this man. We've got a sketch, it's supposed to imitate a hand-drawn version of this guy. And then here, this one is very interesting and also quite hideous. If the authentication needs the person to smile or blink. Here you see they put over his mouth like another person's mouth, which is it looks horrible, but maybe that can trick the camera. So these are all the things that they tested to see if facial authentication software has what it takes to know that these aren't really this guy. But 92.5% of spoofed faces are detected as genuine copies. That would mean 7.5% do not detect them as genuine copies, which is still pretty worrying. They tested these 6 spoofing techniques that you see on the right, and they tested them against different facial recognition software. They tested against Face API MS Azure, Kairos Human Analytics, Cognitive Services Face++, and Amazon Recognition. Also, it should be noted that out of all of these facial authentication softwares, Amazon Recognition did the best by far at knowing if these were not actually the face. But that being said, all 6 of these spoofing techniques were successfully able to trick each face authentication system. So every single one of these had tests where they failed to recognize all 6 of these, which is very worrying because some of these are very rudimentary methods of spoofing someone's face. Here, 3DCT8, the watermarking here on Crazy Talk 8, that didn't matter. It seemed like the devices didn't notice that the watermark was even there, which is worrying. And then the Cartoonize and Sketch 2D drawings of the face also were able to trick the systems, which means that attackers don't even really have to put in that much effort to trick the systems. Because 3D software you have to get and then be able to model and figure out what you're doing. But if you were just a really good sketch artist, it's over. You just draw a picture of Tom Hanks's face doing whatever you need him to be doing, and you potentially are in. So this is sort of the reason why we need something like reCaptcha to prevent these spoofed faces from getting through. So here is a flow chart for how reCaptcha works. We've got the authentication device, so this would be like the phone or computer or whatever you're using to do facial recognition. And then this is the authentication server, which has the database of all the faces on it that knows if you are the correct face to access. So we get here, we have the register authentication phase, which means that you're triggering use of the facial recognition. So it sends a new CAPTCHA, the device gets the new CAPTCHA, displays it, the random letters and numbers. Tom Hanks over here, he says the numbers and it gets his voice response. It grabs his face through either a series of pictures or video. And then it sends that voice and face over to the authentication server. It gets it, gets the CAPTCHA response using speech to text to determine what sequence he said, and checks if the response matches, if it passes the CAPTCHA spoken test. If it doesn't, fails, easy enough. If it does, then it extracts the voice and face features. It's checking if this is a new user to this software, so if he needs to register the user. If they do need to register Mr. Hanks, they will check if this is a duplicate voice and face that's already in the database. And the reason why they do this should be kind of obvious. You don't really want to have, if you're trying to be secure, you don't want to have 2 accounts that are using the same face to be accessed. So it checks if it's a duplicate. If it is, if that face is already in their database, Mr. Hanks already has an account, it'll fail. They'll send the result back. They'll be like, no, dude, you already used that face. But if it's not a duplicate, it adds it to the database, and now it will it'll be able to verify any future user input that comes. So if he does another one and it's now in the database, verifies with the database. It says, hey, is that his voice? Is that his image? Okay, we're good. Boom, you're into your phone or device. That's the basic system of how reCaptcha works. So registration simply checks if the face sample is a real human being and does not already exist in the database. So it's just saying like, hey, this isn't a picture of a tree or something. That's like a human face feature, and it's new, so we can actually add it. And then authentication compares the current voice and face samples to the samples used to register. So they're always going to use the initial sample that you put in to register face authentication. And like I mentioned before, the spoken CAPTCHA is faster than the typed CAPTCHA because it's spoken. It takes a lot less time. And it also tests real human response time to confirm liveness. So for example, here, this is an example of an attacker using the CAPTCHA. Now he waited 0.75 seconds to start saying each letter and number in the CAPTCHA. That's a little suspicious. So they might say, hey, you're taking too long to do this CAPTCHA, try again. And that might have been the time it took to find out what the CAPTCHA was and then spoof the Tom Hanks's voice. So that's a good way to tell whether it's an attacker or a genuine, true and honest user. So they did a little reCaptcha analysis with 31 volunteers and various CAPTCHA types. Users had 89.2% overall accuracy with identifying the CAPTCHAs. So not too bad. Users had a 0.93 second overall response time, which is very good. Again, like we said, on average, less than a second to solve a CAPTCHA. So that's quicker than an attacker would do. And it's worth noting, accuracy is higher. The response time is lower than even state-of-the-art CAPTCHA breaking algorithms. So on average, if you set that threshold right there, it's going to be very hard for a state-of-the-art CAPTCHA breaking algorithm to get past that threshold. And they found that audio response CAPTCHAs were processed faster than visual CAPTCHAs, like blinking and smiling and all that. So it's quicker to be reading the numbers and letters and then processing the speech to text than if they're processing whether somebody is making a facial expression or blinking or smiling or etc. Oops. And also, some participants, they timed out because they have a limited amount of time to get in. But they found that people only had to retry the CAPTCHAs at most twice. So not too inconvenient, because the whole point of facial recognition is it has to be convenient, or else we just all have passwords again. So at most twice, not that bad. And 84% favorable response from participants that preferred reCaptcha to other facial authentication systems. So that's pretty good. Seems like people don't mind the extra bit of security. It should be noted, they mentioned this in the paper, it should be noted that this was done on Georgia Tech campus. So, some of this data might be skewed towards people who are a little more like tech savvy, people who are already into technology, people who are aware of this sort of thing, versus a sample size that would be from all demographics of ages and technical expertise. But nonetheless, there are a few potential issues that they've noticed in the paper. Since the reCaptcha only tests the moment it detects any audio, the attacker could, in theory, use filler language to trick the CAPTCHA into confirming liveness. So, like, if you're reading a series of numbers and letters, but you're like, okay, I have to say something or else it's going to time me out before I get access to what the CAPTCHA is. If you're an attacker, you could just be like, 7658, T or whatever. So, like, that's could be an issue. And they mentioned in the paper there's sort of like two ways you could go about addressing this. One way is to treat like it's the first spoken letter of the CAPTCHA, and you say, hey, isn't the first letter, it's T or whatever. So you get locked out of that. But the other way you could handle it is sort of like you treat as if it's just like you give people time to think, and you treat it like it's filler language, and then you use the first actual recorded letter or number of the CAPTCHA. So it just depends on how you want to address that. But in theory, if somebody uses filler language, that could bypass the timeout. Also, finding the right sweet spot, that right zone to timeout so that users have enough time to enter CAPTCHAs, but attackers don't have enough time, that could be kind of difficult. Because, I'm sure the slowest user is slower than the fastest attacker, perhaps, right? So you want to find a way where almost all users can get in the right time, but almost no attackers can get in. So if there's a little overlap, that can be kind of tricky. The paper landed on, and reCaptcha landed on setting the timeout to 5 seconds to get everybody in, which seems decent. But some CAPTCHA schemes they can be broken in 3 seconds, but accuracy of these CAPTCHA schemes, they remain very low. So it's still pretty unlikely that a CAPTCHA would successfully be able to get past the authentication process within 5 seconds, but it is possible. It's not perfect. And they also have semi-automated attacks, which wouldn't use CAPTCHA breaking algorithm, but use real human workers to actually read and solve the CAPTCHAs. But the average solving time for that is 19.17 seconds, at a minimum 10.75 seconds. So that places it well above the 5 second threshold. So that's not really too much of an issue at the moment. So yeah, in conclusion, reCaptcha is definitely more secure than normal prompts like blinking, smiling, looking at the camera, because an attacker would likely not have access to the specific CAPTCHA code. But it's much easier to find someone blinking or smiling, especially somebody who's high profile, which would want their data to be secured. In the future, they mentioned that reCaptcha could be expanded with lip reading. So, since they're recording the video anyways, if they have good technology to be able to track lip reading, they could know whether the person is actually saying the words. And that would make it nearly impossible to spoof authentication, because even if you had, physical access to the device and you were wearing a mask, you have to push your lips through the mask. There's not very many masks that can actually accommodate for realistic lip movement. So that would really be able to help with that and make the devices more secure. And, overall, reCaptcha addresses the growing need for higher security facial recognition, and it provides a solution to malicious attackers using this entry point. I think it's very clear that devices are just going to keep trying to use facial recognition and voice authentication and stuff, even though it's less secure than just password systems. But, if we're doing that for convenience, then we got to make it more secure, and reCaptcha addresses that by adding an extra layer. So that is my presentation. Thank you guys for listening, and this was really fun to research. Have a good one. Anyways, see ya.